Now, today's powerful nugget is this, is that sometimes we can see a need and the answer is us. You're going to hear in today's story how Winell saw a need from her own experiences around blended families and making resources available. And she became that answer to so many other families. Oftentimes, there is a why in our own experiences. And if we will allow ourselves to look up from the work that we are doing to save ourselves, we will see that there are nuggets in that experience that can help other people. That's the power of lifting your voice. You see, what you go through isn't necessarily just for you. Your testimony, your shining of your life, your sharing of your voice could be a lifeline for someone else. And I think you're going to hear how Winell went through this experience and realized that it was she who needed to be the change that she wanted to see. Now let's get into it. For the longest time, I secretly wanted more. I often found myself shrinking to fit in, settling for what was comfortable, and even selling myself short. Once I finally accepted that we deserve success and we are blessed with the power to achieve it, I stopped playing small. I'm serious about building a life I love, and you should be too. I'm Denise Taylor of DeniseTaylor.live, and welcome to Embrace Your Power. I help women prioritize themselves, their success, and their happiness. Now let's meet this week's achiever, whose story will inspire you to embrace your power and go. Well, hello there. It's Denise Taylor, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode of Embrace Your Power. This is the place where you can count on me to always encourage you to build a life that you love. I am so excited to be connected to you. I'm still just feeling fantastic from celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. Just a phenomenal accomplishment. I believe that we have to enjoy our life, that we've got to take advantage of the opportunity to celebrate our wins. I also believe that as you're building a life that you love, that you should take copious notes. And the reason why I say that is because when you go through life's experience, sometimes you just kind of think you arrive there and you forget the journey. Many of us are going through a lot. We're transforming, we're transitioning, and we really are evolving. And the beauty is in the process. And when we miss capturing the moments in the process, we can arrive and sometimes forget what it took to get there. I don't want you to do that, because that transformation process that you go through, now that's the part that's helping to grow and develop you and preparing you for where you're going. All of the richness is in the process. So don't forget it. Don't forget to take notes, take pictures, all of the great things, and celebrate your wins. I was thinking about my word for the year, which is unstoppable. And I'm not letting off of that. I am truly trying to rise up in all the power that unstoppable means. One of the ways that I have started to serve more consistently and more powerfully is helping to lift voices. Now, you guys hear me talk about that often. If you're following me on social media, you see a lot of posts about where I'm encouraging people to lift their voice. If you're joining us on Winning Wednesdays, which is something that has been introduced in our podcast community, then you know I am committed to lifting voices. And what that is, it really is about this notion that there is someone who is waiting to hear your story, to be helped by how you're showing up to serve, to be helped by your testimony even. And if we can get to the point where we're opening up and we're willing to share our voice, then those who are waiting can be helped. I recently heard a podcast where this nugget was shared, and it was so impactful to me. It said that there are people waiting But not only are they waiting, they're at a deficit until you show up and share. And when I think about that, I think about myself and where I was sitting before I got help, before I realized the value of partnership and making connection. I was in a place where I felt alone and I felt like nobody would understand. I had success, but I felt like if I started talking about wanting more or doing more or showing up in other ways, that it would give this perspective that I wasn't grateful for what I had. And that really was not the case. I just wanted more. And I wanted more, not just to consume more, but to do more. And so God really nudged me and really gave me this whole perspective and notion about transcending success and becoming significant. And that is one of the reasons why I have just blossomed so over the last couple of years. One of the things that manifested out of that urge or that nudge was this podcast platform. Now, the podcast is really about challenging us to get past our limiting beliefs, to stop hiding in plain sight, to go ahead, embrace the things that you secretly want more for and go for it. I talk about the success superpowers, seeing yourself successful, shaking off fear, doing the work, taking care of you and holding fast to your faith. I talk about that because those are the things that are going to help you get what it is that you want to get to your next level. All of that was my why. It was what was compelling me to show up in this space so that I could encourage other people to raise their voice and rise up in this season to be available to help and serve others. And I believe that there is a why in each of us that will compel us to serve. Now, where I am is continuing to move forward with my signature events and continuing to move forward with helping other people lift their voices. And that manifests in so many different ways. I have introduced a program called Podcast P.R.E.P, which is completely centered around helping people lift their voice. Podcast P.R.E.P is for podcasters to be. It is someone who really feels that nudge or urge that they should be lifting their voice in the podcast space. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the podcast space is a viable place to lift your voice. But if you feel the nudge of God saying, hey, this is you, this is for you, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And what my Podcast P.R.E.P program is intended to do is allow me to come next to you and help you get out of the gate. We work with podcasters to launch their podcast in less than 30 days. It really is a guide program to you making it happen. It's a jump starter that helps you navigate the concept of your podcast. It helps you to understand the podcast game. And it also helps you to establish the technology platform for your podcast. The reason why I'm talking about all of this today is that my guest today, Winell, was one of the people that I had the opportunity to help lift her voice by helping to launch her podcast recently. She is serving in such a critical and necessary space, and I understand fully why her why compelled her to lift her voice. I am so honored that she trusted me with her podcast journey. I am so honored to have been a part of helping her to launch her podcast. So I wanted her to come on, not to just talk about her experience with Podcast P.R.E.P, but to talk about how powerfully she is serving in the blended family space. So let me read her bio for you before we jump into the interview that I had with Winell. Winell Wilmot is a licensed master level social worker with over 7 years of experience working with children and families. She is a biological mother of 1 and a stepmom of 4. She is the founder of the Blended and Flourishing organization and the More Than a Stepmom community. She is the host of the Blended and Flourishing Families podcast. She is a life coach with a specialization in step family dynamics, providing coaching service to stepmoms. She is also the author of When a Stepmom Prays, a 21-day prayer devotional. I am so excited to welcome my Podcast Prep client who is doing amazing work. Let's jump into the conversation with Winell. So I always love to have very critical and crucial conversations around things that impact our entire life. And while we're on our journey for success, a really big factor in who we are is family. And so Winell stands up as a beacon of hope, light, and inspiration to families who are blended, who have come together and are united in love and wanting to also make sure they prioritize their children in that journey. And so I had the opportunity to connect with Winell as she found another platform to lift her voice. And as I've been tuning into her podcast episodes, I can really sense her heart to bring resources to the table to help families truly flourish in this space. And so I am so excited to bring to Embrace Your Power, Winell. Winell, please tell us more about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Denise. I'm excited to be here. Where to start, right? Women, we wear so many hats. Mm-hmm. So, just from being a daughter of God, I am a mom, I am a stepmom, a wife. Professionally, I am a therapist, so I'm a licensed social worker. And also I am a life coach with a specialization in step family dynamic. I'm also an author. That's exciting to introduce myself as an author. And I'm just so excited to be here with you today.
You know, I am so glad that you start off your introduction with what matters most, especially to me, is your relationship with God, because I'm sure that is a main theme that makes everything you do make sense. You named a lot of roles, and so I too know what it's like to juggle all of that stuff. But if you don't know where it all begins, which is in trusting your relationship with God, sometimes we can get lost in that. And when you layer on this added perspective of blending a family, I am sure your relationship with God is hope and stability as you journey through that. So do me a favor and share as you prefer about your journey to raising interest and serving professionally for blended families.
So like most of us, especially when the heart is in it, we start because it's personal to us. And that's where I started from. Being a stepmom, I like to say I was young. I mean, I know people do it younger than I am, but my husband and I got married. I was 25 or 24. And we had one kid together. And then he had 4 before we met. And so we kind of lived, we didn't do it the traditional way, I would say. So, because I was in my master's program, I was living in Arizona, I was in school. And he was in New Jersey. So our first year and a half, almost 2 years of marriage, we live across country. And so during that time, I was a stepmom in a more emotional type of role than physically. So like I would support him, we'll talk about the kids and all the different things that was going on. But when I moved back to New Jersey and we, were finally under the same roof, that when the true reality of being a stepmom kind of hit me, because then I went from, just maybe talking to the kids, talking about the kids, to actually being active in their life. And it was a struggle from the beginning because the adults were not on the same page. So, there was moms, because we have 3 biological moms that's linked to our 4 children. And they were not happy that he were married. And they had their reservation, about their children being around somebody else and all of those things. So it was tough in the beginning. We went through parental annihilation. My husband was in the court like almost every other day, to the point where the staff on the floor that he goes to knows his name. Like by the time they see him, they knew who he was. And just seeing how he fought to be in the lives of his children actually was one of the first thing that kind of sparked this passion within me to want to help blended families. And then also my own struggle with being a stepmom, supporting your husband, seeing him, and he can't see his kids, he's being denied his kids. And part of that is because you're in his life. Before that, he was like the best dad. But then when he got married, suddenly it was like, oh, he's not a good dad. He's not there for his kids, right? But then also balancing that, as well as, like taking care of children, you loving them, but yet still the other parent don't see you as a loving person in their life. And they have this narrative of who you are. And then the biggest thing for me was I started to lose who I was. And you kind of mentioned that in the beginning, Denise, where you said that, when we don't hold on to God as the anchor, and we start to define ourselves through all of these roles and these different hats that we played throughout life, we start to forget who we are. And I found myself starting to kind of match energy, like we would say in the urban world, where it's like, all right, if you want to be mean to me, I'm going to be mean to you in exchange. And it was too much for me, because that's not who I am at heart. I'm easy breezy type person, loving, forgive too easily, I like to say at times. And so when I saw that, and I found myself going down this hole where this was not the life I wanted. I was miserable. I wasn't happy. We were just going through all of these struggles with court battles, and you are loving people, children, but then yet still they're being disrespectful to you and all of those things. But one area that I was I was blessed in many areas, but I would say one of those is the fact that my children, right? And so I only refer to them as my stepkids when I'm talking in arena where that identification has to be known. But other than that, they're my children. They grew to love me. And although the adults were not on the same page, it didn't impact my relationship with them, which is a true blessing, because a lot of people will have the adults issues, the kids issues, and then the marriage issues and all of those things, right? And so I went online and I went searching for help. And I discovered this world that I did not know existed of stepmoms and, step family resources and stuff like that. And I was intrigued, and I discovered like life coaching and all of these things. I was like, oh my God. And so as I searched the type of support I was looking for, I wasn't truly seeing it. I saw there was some support, but I saw that there was more negative spaces than there was positive spaces. And so that kind of even ignited me to like look more into this. And that's when I decided to get my certification in step parent coaching, because I was already like a therapist when I started down this route, but I knew that every step family is different. The dynamics is different. So what I'm going through may be different from what somebody else is going through. And unfortunately in school, like social work, where you're learning about how to work with families, how to help families, they teach very little on the step family dynamic, very little. Majority of the courses when it talks about family is going to be on the nuclear family. And so I was like, well, I need to know more about this thing if I'm going to help people. And so I went ahead, I got my certification in step parent coaching, and I just started to learn more. And that's when Blended and Flourishing was born.
I want to tell you that what you are broaching on is such a powerful topic, because as you were talking and you used the word annihilation, it sounds strong, but that's exactly what it is. I had the opportunity of being on the outside looking in to a father who was desperately trying to be in his children's life. And when I was watching it, it was heartbreaking to me, because there are so many kids who long for relationships with their father, and their father wants nothing to do with them, often denies them. doesn't want to support them. And so when you have a father who is jumping through hoops to the point where the staff at the courthouse knows who he is, it shows that he was so relentless in wanting to maintain the relationship with his children. And I can only imagine how conflicting that was for you, from a sense of, he loves me, he wants to be with me, and being with me is causing hardship for him to be able to be present and loving to his children. And you touched on something in sharing that I don't think we really understand about this whole blended family dynamic. Oftentimes, when we talk about blended families, we talk about it from a perspective of the potential impact or influence on the children involved. We don't talk about it from a perspective of the relationship of the parents and, the relationship that's being brought to the table that for some reason is causing chaos. And you're like, I'm just here to love. I am just here to want to support and bring life. Help me unpack a little bit about that journey. You talked about recognizing it wasn't who you were, and that it was almost becoming a match of energy, and it was almost becoming something that could have gone completely the wrong way. At the center of where that could have ended up is forcing your husband to make a choice. And I'm so glad that it didn't get there, but I can only imagine for some people it does, whether it's her having to make a choice or him having to make a choice in terms of the relationship I'm in and what it now introduces. How do you journey through that and stay connected to love?
That's a amazing question. And that's another area that I'm so blessed in. And I see when a lot of families struggle in that area, when they are not a team with their spouse, when they're fighting against their spouse instead of fighting together, that's when the whole ships crumble, right? And so my husband and I, in the beginning, we started on a firm foundation, our friendship, our love, everything was strong. And he knew the type of person, I was, and he knew that I would support him. And in whatever it is that he felt, was best for the children, to support him, because he knew I loved the children too. And one of the things that I loved about him that actually, I can say, kind of caught my attention to him was the fact that he loved his kids. So me being there and fighting with him through all of these things, I don't think it was much of a question for me. I know he said there was time where he felt like it would be too much for me. And, he was kind of afraid that maybe, I would want a divorce, because that's a lot. Again, I was young, and I'm going through like all of these things. And so, but how I felt for him was like no question, undeniable. It was like divorce was never crossed my mind once. It was like, I don't know how this thing is going to work, but it's going to work. And then again, part of it too is because I'm also anchored in God. God truly moved in our family, and he still is. And that's part of, like, again, what I said with Blended and Flourishing, part of the things is to let people know that it is possible for things to work out, no matter how terrible it looks like, when you have God in the middle of it. Because Denise, I tell you, we went from fighting to even see the kids on a consistent basis when the kids were supposed to come like every other weekend, to us getting to him texting me and saying, hey, babe, the kid's mom just messaged me, for two of our kids at the time, and, said that she's going through something, and can the kids come live with us for a little bit until she gets back on her feet? I was like, what? What? And that's how come the kids came to live with us. And based on the type of situation we were dealing with, because I believe in God, I knew it was possible that my husband would be in his kid's life the way he wanted to. but never did I imagine that it was going to happen the way that it happened and, in the time frame that it happened. So I think definitely both of us praying for our marriage, praying for understanding and patience with one another. Those were a key factor that we remain a team through it all.
Very, very powerful. How was it going to parent from a distance to now they're in my home? Like, how was that transition? Because that definitely is a completely new dynamic, right? It's not one you fought off. It's not even one that you had any discontent about, but it definitely brought change to the household. So tell me about that whole transition.
It was a huge one because I went from being from a distance to seeing the kids every other weekend, summertime, to being a full-time, step parent, to the kids moving in with us. Because after, we got the two kids, we were able to talk to the other mom, so our other son can come live with us. It was almost like instantly I went from parenting one child full-time to parenting 4 kids on a full-time basis, right? But also, a lot of times we go through stuff in life and sometimes we don't even think about how it impacts us. We just kind of bury it and keep moving. And then we have these unresolved trauma. And then situations happen in life that kind of bring it back up. And that's what it was like for me, because growing up, I was a stepchild, but I never thought about it like that. I never thought about myself as a stepchild, never saw it like that. But I had an experience with when I was about maybe around the age of 3, one stepmom and then another stepmom. And the one when I was younger, the stepmom I had experience with, it wasn't a good experience. She was not kind to me. I don't remember much because I was so young, but I still remember how I felt when I was around her, right? And it's like God already knew that I was going to make the choices that I was going to make, that was going to put me in this role as a stepmother. And so he had already prepared it for me, right? But I didn't know it at the time. And so I had my second experience with another stepmom she was an amazing woman. She had 2 kids of her own. And you couldn't even tell if we were not hers, if we were all together. That's how well she treated us up until this day. We're still in connection with her daughter and we still see her as a sister. And so somewhere growing up, I completely kind of just blocked out that experience that I had and never really pictured myself as a stepchild until when the kids moved in. Mm-hmm. And I saw that I started overcompensating in certain areas and I started burning myself out because I had this image in my head of what a good stepmother was. And I desperately wanted to prevent them from feeling what I felt when I was with that stepmom who wasn't so kind to me. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost, I was trying to control how they felt because I didn't want them to feel that. And so I was driving myself crazy doing all of the things. And that's when I started to realize I was overwhelmed. I was stressed. I was burned out. I still remember this one day we had parent-teacher conference. I did the girls earlier in the day, the 2 girls. And then I was like, all right, I'll do the 2 boys. Since they have similar teachers, it has to be easy. I'll just get this. And I didn't realize how big that school was. I went in that school and I'm running from like the east to the west, from up to down. And I caught myself, I'm like, why? Like, why are you putting yourself through this? Like, you don't have to do it all. They have a dad. And it was funny because that situation brought light to what I was truly going through. But that situation seemed so simple that it brought light to something that was so deep. Mm-hmm. And when I came to that realization, I spoke to my husband and definitely we talked about stuff like he had no problem, like splitting parent-teacher conference and doing all of these things. But I took on all of these responsibility and I didn't leave room for him to parent. And I didn't realize that I was doing that because I was being this stepmom that I had in my mind. Part of it was from experience that I didn't tap into at the time until I started praying about it. And I prayer journal. And that's how, God talks to me a lot. And so through reflecting on the things I was journaling, those old feelings start to come back from when I was younger to now that I'm a stepmom, and it clicked. I'm like, oh my God, this is why I'm driving myself crazy, trying to do all of these things. And then also, you have society looking in on you. And then you have like the friends and the family members and all of these things. So you almost feel like you're living under a magnifying glass. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you have to be this certain type of way to kind of like please everybody and make sure that people don't have the wrong conception of who you are. But through me just working on myself personally and digging deep, that's when I realized why I did certain things that I did. And I started to build the confidence that I needed to know that I was enough. Mm-hmm. And to know that I didn't have to be everything to them. I mean, even though they lived in our home, they also have, a mom as well, too. And so, yeah, that was a huge transition for me and a huge wake up call that I needed.
Wow. I am so glad that you are willing to give voice to your story and your struggles, because I think people find themselves there and they feel alone in that space and not really sure how to navigate it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the services that you show up to offer, the support, the coaching, is so necessary, so very necessary to be a resource for people to tap into. I do have a question though around forging the relationship, and obviously you and the biological moms were able to get past your hurdles and they were able to resolve things on their end. You were able to resolve things on yours. How do you navigate the relationship so that it can at least stay amicable, right? So that we can make sure the best interests of the kids are what is really center stage and focused. And if friendship should form, fine. If partnership should form, fine. If just being congenial should form, fine. How do you navigate that to make sure that the main thing stays the main thing?
So I recently read this quote and I was like, oh my God, this is kind of my life, what I did, but I didn't realize it. And it says that it takes one to forgive, but it takes two for reconciliation, if I'm pronouncing that word correctly. And that's pretty much was what I did with the moms. I forgive them for whatever part of hurt, that I felt that they imparted on our family. But then I accepted them for who they are, not who I wanted them to be. Mm-hmm. I stopped trying to get me from them. And because for me, like I said, it's a blessing because I forgive so easily and can move on from stuff. I was expecting that from them. But they were not there yet. So I met them where they were. So, and what I mean by that, who they showed me they were based on their actions was who I accepted them to be. And so with one of the moms in particular, she was not there. They didn't want no relationship with me whatsoever. Wouldn't even acknowledge me. And so that's how terrible it was. And so my husband did the communication. We had to set up boundaries, and that's for my peace and my safety. So for example, with one of the things where in the beginning, when she messaged him about stuff, if she's, talking to me, she will use an insult instead of saying my name or, saying your wife or whatever. Right. And so, when my husband, men, usually they don't pay as much detail to things as women does. So even when she sent this long text message and stuff, if he shows it to me, he just kind of graze and kind of pick whatever the point that he needs to know. And he's on his way. Whereas I read it and I'm like, okay, I'm analyzing every single word. And then so now my entire day is messed up, maybe my entire week based on what it was. And so one of the things that I spoke to my husband about, I told him, I was like, well, it's not okay for her to message you, like insulting me. Like, she can be upset and feel however she wants to feel. That's fine. But if she's speaking to you about me, it is not okay for her to refer to me, in a derogatory way. And so he was like, you know what, you're right. And so that was a boundary that he put up with her, and saying that, hey, if you want to have a conversation with me, you want to text me, you can't call my wife out of her name. If you do, I'm not going to respond to your message. So if you want me to respond to your message, then you can do that. And when he followed through with that boundary, that changed to where I went from being the female dog to now, oh, your wife, when she was referring to me. So that's something that made me safe and secure in my home. And so that was something that my husband was able to do, because he's the only one who can do it, because he's the one who has the tie to her, not me. And so just little things with boundary to make sure that I felt safe, I felt secure, and then allow them their space to do their process on their own. And so with all of the moms, like, we never had communication. Everything will go through my husband. If they wanted to know how the kids were doing, they would go through my husband, or like they would talk to the kids on the phone and stuff like that. And over time, when they went through their healing process, where I was going through my healing process, then they started to show that, okay, I'm ready to kind of accept her, and that, she's in my children's life. And no matter how upset they may have been, or what type of narrative of who I was that they had in their head, they couldn't deny how I treated their children. They would hear it from their children. And so it was undeniable. And so we got to the point where with one of the moms, was it like 2019? Because usually we parallel parents, because it was a high conflict situation. And so for some people who doesn't know that, like, co-parenting is what everybody wants, is where the mom and the dad, they're on the same page to talk about things, they make decisions together concerning the kids. But if you are in a difficult situation where mom and dad, they can't say one sentence while arguing, parallel parenting might be the best option. And that is when kids are at mom's house, mom does whatever she does there. When kids are at dad's house, dad does whatever he does there. Mom and dad don't talk about what goes on at each other's house, because mom and dad don't know how to communicate effectively without arguing. And so that's what we did for a few years. And then I worked myself up to get to the place where I was willing to accept them whenever they showed up, and was like, okay, here I am, I'm ready. So I didn't close myself off, but I also wasn't waiting on it at the same time. It was like, whatever you give me is what I would take, and I'm okay with it. Is kind of what I did. And we went from having separate birthday parties to 2 of our kids now, we do joint birthday parties together. And the first time it happened, I was so excited for my kiddos, because they had their mom there, they had their dad there, they had their stepmom, and all of these people that love them come together to celebrate them, which was something they didn't have before. And for one of our moms, the ones that we had the most difficult situation with, just recently, I'm like, God, he's working. Just recently, I did a drop off, something that I haven't done in years, because my husband traveled sometimes. And so we would either get his relatives to kind of do like the drop off exchange with the kids, because mom didn't want me doing it. And so I honor that. And I got comfortable with not having that responsibility of doing that. And so I had to do the drop off recently, and mom waved and told me thank you, when she got the kids, which was never happened before. Like, usually she would stay in the car, kids will walk over, get in the car, they drive. But she actually got out of the car, hugged her kids and waved them out, thank you. And I'm like, look at God. It can only be. So I was like, I know that's a long answer to your question, but allowing people to be who they are, accepting them for who they are, and set up boundaries to protect yourself if you have to.
So one of the things that stuck out to me as you were sharing And I'm pretty sure it makes a difference. And I know everybody gets there differently. What's the word? Healing. You acknowledge that healing happened on your side. You acknowledge that healing happened on their side. And one of the things about relationships when they dissolved, regardless of whether they were married, when they came together and they had children, it created such an attachment. And in this case, the attachment that they had expectations tied to it. It had all different things, right? And so you're right that everybody had to take a healing journey. And one of the things that's very true about healing is it's personal and it's on your own time based on your willingness to participate. And so I love that we are hearing how you gave grace and space, how you still presented yourself to be available as much as you were healed to do, so that the reconciliation can have its journey too. And I think the key thing, as I listen to you share, and I listen to my own experience of being a stepchild, and honestly, I never thought about it until you were actually sharing. The one thing that I loved at the end of your sharing is the most important element became the child. You said we were all there to celebrate them. We were all present to acknowledge and honor them. And it does take us being mature enough to handle that space, to handle that opportunity. But at the end of the day, the child is honored in a way that helps them feel healthy and strong and supported by family that has different titles, different roles connected to them from different plays, in different aspects, but they become the center and main focus. And to me, that's the most powerful thing. My parents divorced when I was really young. And honestly, I don't ever remember them living together. I quite think I was the let's give it one more try before we break up, baby. But I don't know that to be true. But what I do know is I never sensed tension. I never sensed break. And so that's why it was so alarming to me when I saw this happening to my friend. It's because my parents just didn't bring that dynamic to it. Like we just existed. And if it was happening, I was oblivious to it even taking place. And because of that, it made me feel comfortable with every dynamic of family that showed up, right? Because there wasn't the tension. And I don't think we realize the pressure that we're putting on kids, and kids with an immature mind often begin with thinking they are at fault, that they are the cause, that their existence somehow caused the relationship to fail and things are tense because of them. And I just love how you guys are maturing in that process. And I want to celebrate the example and acknowledge the resources. Let me ask you this question. Knowing what you know now in the journey that you have taken, if someone is in a relationship and children in past relationships are involved to the degree that they definitely are going to impact their potential future together, what questions, what signs, what perspectives would you say are valuable to either discuss or pay attention to before you get into it to prepare yourself?
A lot of questions. One of the things I would say is, from my experience and just working with clients, like what I've seen, like I said, despite what goes on outside of the home, so the other parents that's not outside of the home, what really makes or break the family is the foundation that's within the home. So the foundation between the husband and the wife. If you guys are solid, you guys can withstand and overcome whatever life may be throwing at you. And so what I see in a lot of marriages, relationships that struggle when you have a step family that people should talk about before they get into that is really, really, not just with how you make decisions with mom and, what type of arrangements do you and mom have have in place and all those things, but with you and your spouse. So that parenting style, like what type of parenting style do you guys have? What type of values do you guys have? Is it similar? Is it the same? Is it so different that it will cause issue? Because when you're in the home, because since that child is not biologically yours, if you're having issues, with that child and your views is completely different than your spouse's views, and you guys can get to a common ground, that's going to be hard because now the war is within the home, not without. So those are some of the things I truly recommend for families to take a look at is when you think about disciplining kids, expectation of kids, what are all of those things? And then as well as, what type of relationship does he have with the biological mother? What type of arrangement do they have? Because a lot of time they may not have like a formal arrangement, whereas like the court system is involved because they've been able to kind of talk through it. But then when marriage happened, where the old emotions or all of these things kind of stir up, and then it's like, all right, now the legal system is involved. So that's something completely different. And so having those type of conversation will help you. I mean, you cannot plan for everything, but it's better for you to be aware than for you to be caught off guard.
So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about your journey to becoming a podcaster and how that is showing up to support all of the ways that you are serving blended families. I am so excited that we are unpacking how Winell faced her fears and now how she helps others win with love and family. She faced that blended family dynamic, which is so common right now. Her husband had 4 children with 3 moms involved, and she was overwhelmed yet committed to love and family. They faced court battles and strained relationships and lots of demanding pressure in their marriage. She found that there weren't many resources available to help blended families, so she began specializing in the field and started the Blended and Flourishing organization to serve the needs she personally experienced. Now, more than that, she began a podcast, another arm of outreach to develop the community of needs. Her why made her grab the mic, and my Podcast P.R.E.P program helped to jumpstart her podcast journey. And now the Blended and Flourishing Families podcast can be heard around the world. I love that I get the opportunity to help women lift their voice. Knowing her story and now watching Winell blossom makes my heart leap. Listening to her podcast is such a testimony for her now and how she is embracing her power. Success looks so good on her, and I hope that you will check out her podcast. But even more, if you know you have a burning desire in your heart and God is nudging you to lift your voice, I would love to be a part of your journey. You see, my Podcast P.R.E.P program is pretty simple. Our goal is to help get you started on the path to lifting your voice. Now, we don't do it in cohorts. I partner with you. I help to get your technology set up, to get you thinking about calendaring and topics, to get you thinking about the interviews you want to conduct so that you can get the help you need to get out of the starting blocks to lifting your voice. Now, I work with you directly, and we start the day that you're ready. And we can launch your podcast in 30 days. Now, if you're interested and God is nudging you to grab a mic because your why is compelling, like it was compelling for Winell, I would love the opportunity to talk more with you. So DM me Or you can email me at denise@denisetaylor.live, and we can chat more about what it is that someone is waiting for you to stand up and share more about. So now that we're back, let me just say this. I recently had the opportunity to celebrate your journey and your step into becoming a podcaster. And after that, you shared with me how big of a personal journey that was for you. Now, I won't go into detail. That's your story to tell if you want to. But I want you to know that as we started into this conversation, I literally held back tears. To hear you now speak so fluently, so powerfully, and rise up so strong with your voice to help women, families who are in this space, and to know that at one point in time, you felt like your voice wasn't strong enough, your power wasn't strong enough, your perspective wasn't strong enough to sit in that seat in the way that you have done today. I was overwhelmed. And I want to just acknowledge and celebrate you on this journey because it is so beautiful. And I kid you not, I thought I was going to have to get up out of this chair and go grab my box of tissues. Your power looks good. And I am so, so glad to have been a part of your journey. And where you're headed in this space, because it is so necessary, is without limit. Don't pull back. Don't shrink. Just continue to step into it, lean into it, and allow yourself to do what you said, which is flourish. Allow yourself to flourish in this space. I am honored to have been a part of your podcast journey, to have supported you in launching your podcast. I will say you used the Podcast P.R.E.P program exactly how it's intended to be, which is the jumpstart to get you going. And when I watch you show up every week and I tune into your podcast episodes and I listen to the guests that you're bringing on and the messages that are going forward, I am just so elated and blessed to have been a part of helping you bring that vision to life. And I want to thank you for trusting me with your voice and trusting me with your project to launch your podcast. So just thank you, Winell. Thank you so much for that. Do me a favor and tell us a little bit about your podcast journey, and then we'll talk a little bit about your podcast prep experience.
Okay. I actually started podcasting back in 2018. So like I said, when this passion sparked up in me, this desire to help, because of my husband's experience, I wanted to help everyone. I wanted to help the stepmom. I wanted to help the dad. I wanted to help the children because of my personal experience. And then also looking at my kiddos and seeing, what they're going through, having to go back and forth between homes and different structure in homes and all of those things. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to help everyone. And so I went through the circle of where do I start? So I'm like, do I blog? And then I discovered podcasting. And so I picked up my phone and I started podcasting, and I only shared it with like a few friends and my mom and sisters. And then I kind of stopped. And a lot of that had to do with, you kind of mentioned, my journey in the beginning. I had a lot of limited beliefs that I was battling. From childhood, I've always wanted to be in the back. Like, if I'm in the room, I don't want nobody to know I'm in the room. Wouldn't say what was on my mind. And so I struggle with that. I struggle with shining. I still am brilliant, but growing up, I was a brilliant kid. I did excellent in school. And I did well than most of my friends who are around me. And so I will shrink back so that I don't make them feel bad that, I was doing better than they were. And I didn't think that I had anything valuable to share. And so just having years of that type of thought process of yourself really crippled me when God finally gave me something to speak about. And I didn't know how to. I was afraid. And so I stopped. And I started doing what I wanted to do in other areas, but God is so gracious and merciful. And so last year, October, He put it in my heart to do a holiday event. I think it was like flourishing during the holidays to help families, give out resources to help family to be able to have a beautiful holidays, because holidays is one of the seasons that is stressful for many step families. And so in doing so, I reached out to my network and I started to do IG Live. And so I would speak to professionals who were providing services to step families to kind of talk about these different challenges that come up during the holidays so they could share their tips to be able to help, those who are going through that. And while doing that, God brought me 360 to do podcasting. It's like, this is where you started with podcasting. So when I got that revelation that I was going back where I started from, I was like, oh my God, it was mind blowing. And God really, really, really does takes His time with us and is extremely patient because He knew at that time I wasn't ready. And so He was like, all right, I will let you do all of these other things to help get you to the point where I know that you are capable of doing this because I created you. I know what I put in you. So, but you have to know it for yourself, right? And so once I did that, I was like, well, podcasting it is. And then I came across you, Denise, and I was like, well, I'm going to need help because before I didn't know what I was doing. I just recorded, I uploaded. That was it. I had no idea what I was doing. And so when I learned about your program, I was like, well, I'm going to give it a try and see if she can jumpstart me, which is exactly what you did.
Wow. I feel honored because when God gave me the vision to lift voices, I just wanted to set them free because I knew people were waiting. I heard something yesterday, and I want you to keep this in mind always. It actually moved me because it said not only are those people waiting, they're at a deficit if we don't show up. What you're doing is helping people become so much better and greater. And with podcasting in the infancy that it is, with this topic not addressed as much as it should be in that space, you have the potential to not only reach them, but get them out of that deficient position and allow them to do what you said, which is flourish. And so I just honor you, and I'm so glad to have been a part of your podcasting journey. So we'll go ahead and close out. Let's do this. Around these parts, I always encourage people to build a life that they love. And I always close out tapping into wisdom. And so I have 3 questions for you. The first one is this: what's your life wisdom? What would you tell your younger self about life if you could?
Oh, mine is to do it. No matter how scary it may seem, go ahead and do it. Because it's better for you to learn from what you did than to regret what you didn't do.
That is so true. There's nothing ever as torturing as regret. And so I agree with you. Excellent life wisdom. What's your love wisdom? What would you tell your younger self about love if you could?
Definitely is to keep loving, to know not everybody have the same capacity to love you the way how you love them. So to love according to how you want to and not really measure it according to how you want other people to love you.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. And then finally, what's your happiness wisdom? What would you tell your younger self about happiness if you could?
It depends on you. You cannot rely on other people to make you happy. It's okay for you to let your head down and do the silly dance, for you to laugh until your stomach hurt. It's okay for you to try all of the things that interest you and not to hold back.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So I do have Instagram, so Blended and Flourishing Families, Blended and Flourishing, on IG. I shared the podcast information on there. I have my IG, Winell Wilmot, where I talk more about stepmom related stuff on there. We have the podcast, Blended and Flourishing Families. That's YouTube also. I have a YouTube now as well, which is my name, Winell Wilmot. So you can find me in all of those places, as well as blendedandflourishing.org, the website.
I'll make sure to put all of those things into the show notes. And I just want to close out just continuing to celebrate you. You're doing a fantastic work, and success looks so good on you. And now you just keep going for it and keep embracing your power.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. Don't ever forget that you truly deserve life, love, and all the happiness your heart can hold. Be relentless in building a life you love without apology. I'm Denise Taylor, and you can always find me in our free Facebook community, Life, Love, in the Pursuit of Happiness, easy to find. Now be sure to rate and review this podcast and share it with a friend. And make sure you've subscribed so that we can stay connected each week. And remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He gave us power. So be sure to always embrace your power and go.